Thank you for choosing Tox News, your one and only source into the toxic stream of my mind. Just kidding. We have a bit of toxicity to go over today. Of course, coming from the right wing. Not to ignore liberal propaganda, but to merely observe the most absurd. So. To begin today, I do have to speak about a couple of things. One of them being Texas Senator Ted Cruz saying that he was escorting his daughters to Mexico. A trip of the Cruz family to Mexico received a bit of controversy, and as Mr. Ted Cruz returned, he had this to say.
Whether the decision to go was tone deaf, look, it was obviously a mistake, and in hindsight, I wouldn't have done it. I was trying to be a dad, and all of us have made decisions. When you've got two girls who've been cold for two days and haven't had heater power, and they're saying, hey, look, we don't have school, why don't we go, let's get out of here. Whether the decision to go was tone deaf, look, it was obviously a mistake, and in hindsight, I wouldn't have done it.
And the blind elitism of saying, well, I had to do what was best for my daughters, and I have the means to escape this blistering apocalypse, so I did so. I did see a few conservatives say, well, if I had the means to leave Texas, then I would too. Good on you, Cruz. Obviously ignoring the optics of looking like how it looks to go on vacation while people within the state that you represent in Congress is freezing and boiling their water or finding other supplies of water. Now, through most of the people considered right-wing thought leaders, I have mostly found them doing whataboutism. If Ted Cruz is doing so bad, why were you silent during Cuomo's ineptitude, allowing thousands of seniors to die in retirement homes? And my simple answer to that is, if you're ignoring Cuomo to bash Ted Cruz, or you're ignoring Ted Cruz to bash Cuomo, either way, both are wrong. Cuomo should face accountability for his actions in regards to the retirement homes COVID cases and deaths. There's accountability to be held there. Even the GOPs in New York have introduced articles of impeachment, which we will have to see the case build if it passes. But to say that, one side of the political spectrum is bad and that's why we shouldn't necessarily be focusing on a Cruz is the reason why we have one side holding the other side accountable while ignoring their own side, and this partisanship that really just feeds into the crony and corruption of our government and political process. Because if we're not going to hold both sides accountable to their fuck-ups, what are we really doing here? We're supporting teams, and that's not really how a democracy or a healthy political organization should focus around. I feel like that is pretty obvious. So, I did see a few people not necessarily agree. I went to the r/conservative Reddit just to, see how people who float around these forums reacted to this news as well, whether they were going to be as partisan as, say, Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk, or if they were actually going to be a little bit more critical thinking, and I hate to say it, like the Lincoln Project. The Lincoln Project actually said that Ted Cruz needs to resign. I'm not sure that is an appropriate response for Ted Cruz being completely tone deaf to what's going on in his state. It does show that he doesn't necessarily represent his constituents nor feel for them 100% or is willing to work for them in their most time of need. So maybe there is a bigger case for him to resign or be impeached, but at least some conservatives are speaking up and aren't blindly following their party. So one person in the r/conservative has said, I got family in Mason, Texas, and I'm hearing some choice words against Ted Cruz right now. There's a reason he asked for a police escort on his way back in. They responded, people are pissed that he seemingly lied about it too. We saw you on standby for the return flight, Flyin' Ted. that's a little play on words on lying, Ted, which I think Trump had originally coined during the debates in 2016 or 2015. Just admit you didn't initially schedule your flight back for the next day. You went standby when the outrage started. Another reply begins saying, even if he had a vacation that had already been planned, he had to have known how stupid and bad this was going to look and that people would jump on it. Not necessarily focusing on the accountability that he should face here, but and how just obviously tone deaf this was. Even if Ted physically being in Texas probably doesn't matter in any way, shape, or form, I have to agree with this. Politically, it just looks bad. Now, the thing is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, representative from New York, is flying into Texas to help do mutual aid by handing out supplies. Now, you can say she's doing that for press release or optics situation to make her look better than Ted. But, if we're going to put the narcissism and cynical excuses to the side, AOC is at least dedicating her time to alleviate the harm and do some reduction on that and help people on the ground, whereas Ted Cruz's first reaction was to literally go on vacation. Someone here says, not good enough, Ted. You fucked up. This person said he was saving electricity for other Texans by leaving. Obviously, a sarcastic response to all of it, but nonetheless, does kind of scoot some accountability. It's kind of funny. So someone says here, I don't get why he didn't send his family to Florida, which is at least the USA, and stay there himself. It is such an easy way to get attacked for leaving USA, so I am shocked by his lack of foresight. Does his presence really do anything? No, this is still utterly stupid by him. And yet, I still have to bring up the fact that there are other people, even Beto O'Rourke has been working on the ground to provide a form of mutual aid, do phone banking to raise funds for alleviating people's suffrage. So again, the people not focusing in on Ted Cruz doing absolutely nothing for his own state because he's a senator and that doesn't mean he has any job required responsibility right here. He didn't have a humanistic response whatsoever, and I feel like a lot of people are ignoring that he didn't take a humanitarian stance to go out and actually help people while they're suffering. So ignoring that is a very interesting thing, to just say the optics are bad, but not point out that the optics are bad because he is anti-humanitarian. He's careless, essentially. So that's Ted Cruz. I don't want to get into him too much. Another thing coming out of Texas is that we have a drilling company that operates in Texas and Louisiana told investors that the surge in natural gas prices amid powerful winter storms was giving it a major financial boost. Obviously, and this is a quote here, obviously this week is like hitting the jackpot, said the CFO, Roland Burns. And I think there's actually a little bit of a clip here. This was reported by NPR, but I'm pretty sure there's a voice clip here. Nope, there is no clip here. I had heard the clip where he had said it, but this article does not include it specifically. But again, that's the real issue of having a system that incentivizes maximizing surplus value. When people start making off a profit off of an emergency or a dire situation, it's morally disgusting. And so this guy basically bragging about it is yet again another show of elitism and carelessness and anti-humanitarian. So the level on Texas right now I think is like a level of necro-capitalism where, the people who operate the resources are focusing on who deserves to live and who deserves to die. And it mainly begins with elites deserving to live and the unproductive deserving to die. This in itself isn't like a show of them purposefully going through necro-capitalism, but the profits made off of the suffrage from people in Texas does a little bit. And that trajectory that we're going in, where we keep incentivizing, maximizing surplus value with things that are necessary that we made commodities, is how we just get deeper into this root of people making money either off of death or pain. So Texas is a great example of why we need to continue socializing a lot of things, specifically with the infrastructure of what humans need in order to function and survive. And that needs to be pushed heavily because, as we see, like climate change worsening conditions all around the globe, we're going to have a humanitarian crisis to the likes of which we have not seen. Let's not profit off of it, is what I'm suggesting here. So that's a little bit of caught up on Texas. Today I wanted to get into PragerU's Fireside Chat. Dennis Prager does a Fireside Chat, I think, every Friday, where he kind of discusses whatever is on his mind. And I haven't covered one of those yet, and I have one, and I am interested in doing so. But for a little bit of what is the write up to, we have Fox News reporting on Representative Boebert defending firearm Zoom background amid backlash from colleagues, and she. Representative Lauren Boebert from Colorado showed up to a House meeting, which was all on Zoom, and she had two carbines behind her, and they were very improperly placed. One of them had their chamber open, which is a horrible way to get dust inside of your gun, and I think they were also fully loaded. So that's not like not a safe way to store your gun. So incredible irresponsibility is on top of having a weird gun fetish. And yeah, so that had happened. Another thing that I noticed when I was going through Fox News's I guess videos of the past 2 days, I have not seen them actually report on the situation with Ted Cruz. They did yesterday have a 30-second clip or report, if that's what you want to call what Fox News does. They had 30 seconds dedicated to letting people know that Ted Cruz tried to leave the United States and go to Cancun, but was caught and was forced to return because of public outrage. They didn't dive too much in yet again on how that was an anti-humanitarian thing to do, on top of it being very bad optics during a emergency when most people would consider that members of a community need to have all hands on deck. And so looking at that, I saw 30 seconds clips, and then I saw maybe two or three longer, not clips, but longer segments that were dedicated to talking about Andrew Cuomo and his response in New York with the coronavirus and the deaths of senior citizens in retirement homes. So they're even participating as well in the whataboutism, but not by bringing up Ted Cruz and saying, but what about blah, blah, blah. They're just merely focusing the attention on Democrat leaders who have their own level of ineptitude and possible corruption. All right. So to get into ineptitude, we have Representative Boebert defending her firearm Zoom background amid backlash from colleagues. I'm going in this entirely cold. Let's get it.
Lauren Boebert, the object of Democratic derision again tonight following a virtual House committee hearing where her collection.
If somebody wants to have a shrine to their gun fetish as a Zoom backdrop in their private life, they can do that. But this is our hearing room. And at some point, we'll all start showing up in person, and our safety and our ability to conduct business civilly without feeling threatened is a relevant consideration.
Let's bring in Congresswoman Boebert now to respond to Congressman Huffman's criticism. Good evening.
That really seems to only follow because Boebert was the representative, one of the representatives who was going past security metal detectors and carrying a concealed weapon. And then she also ran on the fact that she was going to carry her gun in Congress all the time to say that she's a 2A supporter all the time. So with him saying that he doesn't feel safe in that kind of environment, that's more what he's alluding to, is that like once we have guns just constantly showing in these Zoom meetings, you're going to bring guns into the congressional meetings like you have before, and my safety is not going to feel very secure, especially since Lauren Boebert has like slight connections to, what was it? It wasn't 3%ers. It was another group. It was like Boots on the Ground for Trump, I believe it was, and which is like a militia group of the far right persuasion, and they tend to fit into this reactionary, anti-left, anti-liberal rhetoric, political positions, and in a lot of ways that can mean that they want to hold trials against Democrats or commit acts of political violence against Democrats. So I can kind of get where he's getting this like feeling of insecurity when coming around Lauren Boebert.
Good evening, Mike.
How do you respond?
The left's disdain for the Constitution was on full display in the Natural Resources Committee. Rather than having a productive debate about policy, I have more than 55% federal lands in my district in Colorado. I wanted to talk about Democrats' overreaching policies and their land grabs and closing off our beautiful rivers here in our district. But Democrats were too busy mocking the Constitution and disrespecting the everyday Americans that
I find it very interesting that she's not using the same background that she did in that House meeting that she is in this interview. In this interview, she has books behind her, but in that House meeting, she had guns behind her. So obviously, she has a choice in what kind of background she sets, and it almost seems like that was a bit of a distraction, and now it created this news story. And now we're talking about this and not necessarily her policies toward, the issue that she's talking about right now, which is natural resources and the protection of wild lands and federal lands. So that's very interesting.
I was elected to represent. This was my first committee hearing, and the chairman couldn't stop attacking, degrading, and insulting committee members. Just look at the way I've been treated by the fake news and by creeps like Representative Jared Huffman. He was literally looking like Jiffy Pop. Perhaps Huffman is actually the famous corn pop we've all heard so much about. Mike,
this is so amazing that she's going into a full attack on character of like everybody here. When I guess you can say that her character was first attacked, but she displayed weapons, which is obviously a little aggressive more than regular people. Like she took a much less aggressive position by having books behind her during this Fox News interview. But she's like obviously attacking her coworkers here at this point through ad hominem attacks, attacking their characteristics and not focusing in on actually arguing their policy positions. So Lauren Boebert is far more of one of those culture war politicians, and she's going to focus on that to propel her political career rather than any substantial or substantive political policies.
he fashioned a tinfoil hat during my remarks, and he looked like a conspiracy theorist in regards to our Second Amendment rights. These partisan hacks obsess over me having my Second Amendment right, wanting to protect myself, and say that I have a so-called gun fetish. Despite these gross attacks, I am busy fighting against the left's real.
But that's the thing, is that you really only need to display your guns in acts of defense if that's what you're truly about, is defending your rights. So bringing them out into like this House meeting again comes off a little bit more standoffish than she's letting on here. And she also knows that it was probably going to trigger the Democrats, who are a little bit more queasy around gun display in general. So yeah, she's going full culture war here and has like literally nothing policy-wise to stand on.
Real fetish for power and stripping Americans of their constitutional rights.
Congresswoman Katie Porter from California tweeting today, I always thought my dirty dishes piled up and accumulating bacteria were the most dangerous thing in a Zoom background. Hashtag safe storage. Do you want to respond to her too?
Nothing about my display was the storage. They were in my possession, and so it's kind of alarming that she has so many dishes in her sink collecting bacteria. Do your dishes, hun. I'm a mom of 4 and now a congresswoman, and
did she say that that's not how they're usually stored? Is she intending to say, like, now at this point, that's not how she stores her guns? Because then even more so, then she put it on for display. Like, obviously, she's going at this and knew that this was going to get attention. She knew that this was going to get attention, and now she's being fed it. And this is exactly how a representative who doesn't have any political or ideological substance to their name gets their name out there and into the minds of people who will support their movements further on, is by having these weird viral culture war issues to drive all of their policy forward, or not even policy, but career.
My sink's empty, so maybe she needs some extra help there at home. But nevertheless, I get it.
But then again, she attacks the character. She attacks the character, and it has nothing to do with policy stance. Rather than defending her position on why it was okay for her to store or display her guns in that manner, she attacks that woman for saying that she has dirty dishes.
Democrats are going to come after me. I'm a threat to them because I'm doing exactly what the people sent me to do. It's kind of funny that the Democrats think that I won't have something to.
But here's the thing: is that they're not talking about Lauren Boebert's like political positions either. They're merely talking about her cultural presence and how she puts off this far right kind of presence. So like, even their criticisms of her are much more characteristic of her character and not necessarily any arguments that she forms. But that's the realm that she pulls this discussion into, because she's not talking about policy whatsoever. She keeps bringing it up that the 2A here is in the struggle, when that actually has nothing to do with the situation, with like how much you wanted to flex your armament. She is really good at bringing the conversation into a realm where she can keep it tightly controlled.
To say about the Second Amendment rights. I own Shooter's Grill. I'm the co-chair of the Second Amendment Caucus.
To be fair, though, you had to know the gun display was going to get under the skin of some of your colleagues, right?
In the House Committee on Natural Resources, they wanted to ban firearms. I was absolutely going to have a display of how foolish their rule was. They want virtual committees and they want to ban firearms. It's only going to be Republicans in person anyhow. I am completely allowed to conceal carry my firearm in the Capitol complex. And for them to come up with this rule was a discriminative attack on me.
Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, thank you so much for your time.
It was an attack on her that she initiated. He asked her if she knew if they would get mad or not, but she kind of steered away from that and didn't necessarily answer the question. And that's because we all know the answer, and that she did know that it was going to piss some off and that she was going to get media attention for doing so, because she's the same candidate who kept bringing a concealed carry into the Congress and bypassing metal detectors, which got her attention, got her media attention, and continues this over and over again. And I cannot believe that this woman is a representative in the House. That's amazing. And it just shows how effective that the culture war is at getting people elected, either from Donald Trump to Lauren Boebert to Marjorie Greene Taylor. It's amazing. I'm just curious. So here, guns aren't allowed everywhere. They're prohibited in the House and Senate chambers and their adjoining lobbies and cloakrooms, the marble room of the Senate, and the Rayburn of the House. So they were technically breaking, Lauren Boebert was technically breaking, not sure if it was law or just building policy here. So 5 days before the Capitol insurrection, 83 House Republican lawmakers wrote a letter to Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy asking them to uphold lawmakers' right to carry firearms inside the U.S. Capitol complex. They cited several attacks, including a 1954 shooting by Puerto Rican nationalists who wounded 5 congressmen, a 1998 shooting that killed 2 Capitol police officers, and a 2017 shooting at a congressional baseball practice in Northern Virginia, which left 4 people wounded, which is interesting because that 2017 shooting, I know specifically, did not take place in actual building, like Capitol property. So arguing that case, using that as an argue to carry it on property doesn't really fit at all. One of the signatories on the January 1st letter, freshman Representative Marjorie Greene Taylor of Georgia, made headlines for lashing out at Capitol Police, who insisted that lawmakers go through metal detectors that were erected at the entrance to the House and Senate chambers following the insurrection on January 6th. At least a dozen other lawmakers also refused pushing their way past Capitol Police. The episode prompted Pelosi to announce $5,000 fine for members who refused and $10,000 for each subsequent offense. A 1967 law banned civilians from carrying guns on Capitol Hill, even if they have concealed carry licenses. But the law carves out an exemption for lawmakers who can keep firearms in their offices. Guns aren't allowed everywhere, though. They're prohibited in the House and Senate chambers and their adjoining lobbies and cloakrooms, the marble room of the Senate and the Rayburn room of the House. So, that does mean that they are actually breaking a law. Not saying that the law is necessarily right and they are free to introduce legislation to amend that law, but Lauren Boebern is not correct by saying that the Second Amendment upholds my right to ignore that law. That's not how it works. Oh, God, I hate culture war candidates because it literally offers nothing substantial for voters and working class individuals. They offer literally nothing for you except for the anger and rage that can go into a culture that is changing beyond your control. All right, so we're woken up. We're in it. And that means we got to get into Prager, Dennis Prager, the head of PragerU, and his Fireside Chat, where he distills his thoughts into a sweet thought juice that you can sip up it with ease, down like water. Let's go. Let go. Why won't it go? Go.
Hi, everybody. And I
right.
know this is a strange moment because this is... Oh, he was very comfortable till I lifted my hand. That was Charlie, by the way. That is, Charlie belongs to Rodrigo. Rodrigo is behind the camera now. And Charlie and I have a fairly long relationship. Nothing like this, of course. How you do? Oh, my God. You're up today, Otto. The man. America's best known dog. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Fireside Chat. I'm Dennis Prager. This is number 100 and... This is number 172. 72. That's a lot. And we haven't missed a week in 172 weeks. Is that right? That's what's amazing. Well, how do I explain this to those of you who are new to me? This is just a chance to completely spontaneously offer you some thoughts about life, about America, about a whole host of issues, and take your questions. And that's really what it's about. It is 99% unrehearsed. So you'll say, what is the 1%? The 1% is I do give thought to what I will open up talking about. That's true. I do. Today's opening is so important that I hope number 172 will go viral. That's how.
And I'm hoping that this will help him go viral. I very much doubt that my coverage of this would, but here I am, Prager. You caught my attention.
Important I think this subject is.
Let's see.
So I want to explain to you.
Ooh, 791,000 views.
What I think is one of the 2 or 3 most important things people have clear about life in order to understand life and to have wisdom, which is the same thing as understand life. Human nature is not basically good. I've talked about this on many occasions. I have.
There's already a lot to unpack there. Dennis Prager here is claiming to be the philosopher's stone, that he can fit all the wisdom of life within himself. I find it very interesting because the Taoist religion, which I follow pretty heavily, says that if one can explain the Tao, they do not truly understand the Tao. And I feel that in a lot of ways with life, that if you can simply explain life in a couple of sentences, that probably isn't all that life is. So if Prager here is able to explain in 30 minutes the entirety of life within it, I will be incredibly impressed, because that is a feat that many philosophers, writers, novelists, poets, artists, all kinds of people have been trying to distill into their work. And for him to be able to do it in 30 minutes and framing it around the idea of American exceptionalism, incredibly impressive, no matter how wrong it may be. But if it's not hitting the mark, well, then he's just like the rest of us, taking jabs in the dark.
A PragerU video on it. People don't quite understand why it's as important as I know it is.
And I almost skipped a point there, is that he said that humans aren't inherently good, I believe is what he said. Let me rewind here for a second.
Video on it. People don't quite understand why it's as important.
Hold on.
About this on life. Human nature is not basically good.
Okay. Human nature isn't basically good, which I don't know 100% what that means, but what I think he means is that it's not inherently good. Not every human being comes out as a inherently good person. And I think what he's maybe alluding here to is that people are inherently bad, which I don't agree with either. I think people are inherently neutral because as you see the whole game of life play out, we have both good and bad actors, and then those things kind of change depending on what side you're on. So I don't think humans are inherently anything but neutral.
Talked about this on many occasions. I have a PragerU video on it. People don't quite understand why it's as important as I know it is. And I won't give you all the reasons it's so important to understand how profoundly flawed human nature is. I want to make something clear. There is good in human nature. There's no question about that. Otherwise, you couldn't explain any goodness. There is goodness on earth, after all. There are people who are good. They work on themselves and they work on their nature, or in some cases, they're just luckily born with a really good nature that is not the usual flawed nature. But the reason I'm raising...
So I'm guessing Prager would argue not that humans are inherently bad, but they're inherently flawed. And I think that's more of a Judeo-Christian kind of output to it. And especially since you have a very subjective reality to fit into like what makes perfection and what makes flawed. So that's very interesting. Are we talking about strengths and weaknesses here, or that whether or not they're normal or, different? I don't know what realm we're really playing this here.
Today is that to understand what is happening in America today, this is the key thing to understand. So I'll go to the conclusion and then I'll work backwards. If you understand...
And I've been trying to get better understandings in logic and reasoning, but if you're making an argument, you don't want to start with your conclusion. I think that's actually a bad a bad way to frame your argument, because then everything that precedes it is merely a premise to try and then prove your conclusion, which then makes it very difficult to actually persuade people who don't already agree with you to fall under to your side. So that's why like this is going to make it extremely easy for me to actually refute his conclusion, is because he's starting with his conclusion rather than building into why a conclusion would be correct with his premises. So that's actually a bad way to start an argument or your case in whatever you're trying to persuade people into.
Understand how flawed human nature is, you will understand what a moral achievement America is. That's it.
So by understanding how flawed humans are, we can understand how what an achievement America is. Okay, I guess that's the conclusion that we're supposed to reach after all of his supporting evidence. So let's see.
That's the key to what I want you to understand today. See, if you have really mundane ingredients and make a terrific meal out of it, that's a big achievement. If you have spectacular ingredients, it's not as big an achievement. Given the ingredients of human nature.
I don't agree, because they both came out with, the spectacular they both, like, the outcome for both cakes was spectacular. So why is one less just because one had spectacular ingredients that made a spectacular meal, and then the other had mundane ingredients, but the cook was efficient enough to make a spectacular cake? You still come out with the same outcome. So I don't know why having one with person, I guess, like that, again, like you would have to like, oh, I like the underdog, and that's why they make him better than Gordon Ramsay, because no name chef over here was able to cook something with mundane ingredients as good as Gordon Ramsay with spectacular ingredients, even though the cake itself are the same exact outcome. So then you have to have the preconceived notions that underdogs are inherently better because they're the underdog. You see what I hope that makes sense.
What America baked itself into, if you will, cooked itself into, is an astonishing achievement. But if you think people are basically good, which a lot of people, especially the well-educated, because they don't understand much, and
I like how the well-educated don't understand much. Like, that's anti-intellectualism, that if somebody has a degree, you should just not trust them because they have a degree. That's not a, I think in that form, that's also like a logical fallacy. That to say because somebody has a certain characteristic is why somebody is wrong. That isn't actually a good argument to make. So, and he's also like straw manning. So he's creating an imaginary academia who believes this just out of nowhere. Like, this is all imaginary, and we have to take him for his word for it. So, I don't like anti-intellectualism. I think people who spend all their time trying to study things do it for a reason, and also come out with much more knowledge in doing so.
Unfortunately, I mean that literally. They think, well, human nature is good, so of course it's astonishing how terrible America is. If you start...
I don't know who argues that. I don't know a single person who says human nature is inherently good, so why the fuck is America so evil? I don't hear anybody make that argument ever. No.
Start out with the appreciation of the raw material, then you marvel at how good America became. Of course America has bad aspects to it. Of course it does. How could it not? Look at the raw material, human beings. What nation, what country, what tribe, what group has not had a profoundly flawed society? That's why, among other things, you have to compare America to other places.
It's not really that fair to compare all the time, because like when you compare to how tribes were living and then how they have to now live under American society, which one's really more flawed? Because one ended up removing the sovereignty and individual freedom of Native Americans and asserted the sovereignty and freedom of immigrating Europeans. So that's not a great equivalency to make. And also to say that like every tribe was flawed, like, again, that's subjective, because what would Dennis Prager say that a society is flawed in? And that just means that we have to assume that he's right, and that's not a great way to form an argument either, because even though there were some flaws, maybe there were greater benefits to living in a Native American tribe pre European colonialism than there is post. So that's, I can't agree with the premise, and now the conclusion is sounding like it's not going to work.
Who made as free a place for as many people from as many backgrounds? Nobody. That's not to say that all Americans are good. A lot of Americans are awful. In fact, more today than...
Dude, honestly, too, like, America wasn't even the first place to abolish slaves. So, what?
Perhaps ever before in some ways, which is a very sad thing for me to say, because it's a very painful subject. But given, again, this raw material, it is astonishing what we made here, what Americans made here. So let me deal with this raw material. Very rarely I use notes, but there are...
I just want to say here, too, that you can feel pride for America in certain ways, but you also have to be aware of our flaws and be critical of them so that we can improve through history as we continue to move into the future, that we look at history, say, these things were wrong, let's not repeat it, and move forward off of that. That's not to say that you can't be, proud of the fact that we had to overcome these challenges that we are also ashamed of.
So many lousy parts to human nature. I had to make a list of some of them. This is not an exhaustive list, and it's not in any order of importance. When you realize what people want, what animates them, and then you realize that this place has been pretty darn good with all its flaws. The flaws are completely understandable. The good parts are a riddle. The freedom, the opportunity, the working through the terrible origins that had racism in them. It's an amazing achievement given human nature. So
Overcoming the founding of our nation? That was really confusing. Oh, that was so confusing. Let me rewind here for a second, because there was something he said that I attached to, but then it got really jumbled up.
The flaws are completely understandable. The good parts are a riddle. The freedom, the opportunity, the working through the terrible origins.
The flaws are understandable because they happened and we have historical context to put them into. I'm really genuinely confused by what he means with like how the goods are the mystery. Because even that too has historical context and can be understood through a historical lens. So that's, again, I'm very confused. I am very, very confused. I got to rewind it again just a little bit further.
List. And it's not in any order of importance. When you realize what people want.
And here's the issue too, is that what people want is not necessarily like, that doesn't have a natural nature to it either. Human nature, like, there is no human or a natural human desire. Like, a lot of that really does come from the times that you live in. It's relative to the society that you live in as well. Other societies are much more focused on communal support, while other ones are much more focused on individual pursuit of happiness. So even that doesn't have a natural human form. So by saying once you figure out what humans want, that you have the key to understanding the goods and our flaws, I don't see that either, because what humans want is on an extremely huge individual level.
What animates them, and then you realize that this place has been pretty darn good with all its flaws. The flaws are completely understandable.
And it's also to say that's true too, because America doesn't provide housing, you have to earn it. America doesn't provide food, you have to earn it. America doesn't provide clothing, you have to earn it. America doesn't provide healthcare, you have to earn it. So even by saying that too, that America provides for what people want, that's not even on the mark either. Because that's not even like the frivolous desires of human beings. That's actually the necessity or the necessary desires of human beings, which go into their survival. So, like,
the good parts are a riddle. The freedom, the opportunity, the working through the terrible origins that had racism in them. It's an amazing achievement given human nature. So here are some parts of human nature I thought I'd share with you that are, shall we say, difficult. No order of importance. A vast number of people, for example, yearn for power. Power.
Wow. Rather than focusing in on like a specific social issue, this is a much more individual issue. Especially one that is within this society, where you either assert your power by becoming an exploitative employer, or you assert your power by becoming a representative in government. So,
The desire to have power over other people is apparently very widespread. It is especially true in many men. And I must admit, I have a flawed nature like anybody else. This is not one of my built-in flaws. There is zero desire in me to have power over anybody else.
Which is very interesting, because he runs PragerU, where he employs a lot of people. And then on top of it too, influence is a sub-form of power. Having influence of people's beliefs, perspectives, any of that is a form of power. And he spends 30 minutes telling people how to think or what to think, or at least thoughts on life. So I don't believe you, Dennis. I do not believe you. Even me coming and doing this obviously shows that I have a seated desire to have either influence or power over others. And unfortunately, that means you listening to this, because I don't employ anybody to do this. I merely need people to support the content. So that means I'm exploiting your consumption. That's pretty much it. Prager has employees. So he's at least extending beyond the past power of influencer. He also has power over people that work for him. So I don't know if that's out of his own desire necessarily, but it does mean that he has power over others. So if he doesn't want that power over others, why would he not dissolve PragerU into a workers' co-op?
I can't even, I know it's there. I know how widespread it is, but I must tell you, I have no relationship to it. It's one of the reasons I didn't.
He just lied. I just told you how he has relationship to power over others. Being an elected official is not the only way to have power over others.
Run for office. It's one of the reasons I'm conservative. I don't want anybody to have power over me either. I want me to have power over me. I want my moral code to have power over me. I want God to have power over me, and that's it. So I don't want to have power over anybody else. And that, by the way, that was the American founding dream. Small government, so that...
No. The founding American dream was the protection of property. That's the whole reason why the government was balanced, like not balanced, but created in the way that it was. The reason why it was balanced in the way that it was to decentralize power. A monarchy had a very focused absolute power, whereas the American government tries to break it off into three branches, and then also holding representatives accountable through democratic voting, which we can argue whether or not that's very effective these days now that we have so much money in politics. Money has a bit more democratic power than the constituent voting in the voting booth. But, yeah, that's, wow. No, that wasn't the founding American dream, was a small government. The only reason why the government was small at the time was because we were starting a government. Yes. It was founded on private property. Private property is the American dream, and they basically got a bunch of lawyers to create a constitution to ensure the protection of private property.
You can develop individually to the best of your ability without the...
And that's because your individual self is owned by you. You are your own property, and so that kind of fits into that. So when we even talk about the Bill of Rights, it's not even necessarily human rights, because they don't delve into what you need as a human being, but rather what you need to protect yourself against legal litigation or overreaching government as a property, as the sole owner of you.
Most universal thing in the world.
But also remember that didn't include certain kinds of human beings at the time.
Strong government, princes, kings, queens, emperors, other governments, dictators, tyrannies. I mean,
dictators aren't even really that different from monarchies. It just seems that dictators have a much like, they have more institutions on their hands that allows them to do more things, whereas the king could literally order anybody. The authority of the dictator is still derived from the institutions that he wields in his arsenal, whereas a king could literally just say, do it, and anybody would have to do it.
Think about it. The human norm has been for the state to have power over the individual. America was founded to reduce the power of the state. There is no other country in the world founded on the basis of limited government. You know how this alone ran against human nature. People want power. That's why America is divided into three co-equal branches.
It's very interesting too that like you would say that we did something against human nature rather than thinking that eventual decentralized power where democracy is spread is not a human nature. Human nature is actually more fit towards authoritarianism and monarchies because that's how they used to be. But then we changed human nature by going into a constitutional representative democracy. And I don't agree. I don't think there is a human nature to how we organize our societies, our politics. We've shown through other tribes and bands, our hunter-gatherer days kind of provide a look into that. We've had various organizations and hierarchies throughout history, and saying that we have one sole humanistic or human natural way to do that isn't true and can't actually be proved through any analytical science whatsoever right now. So
the presidency, the Congress, and the Supreme Court, because they didn't trust humans with power. Power corrupts, and absolute power.
But guess who runs those? Guess who runs the institutions that that divide the power? Humans. So it's not that humans having power is the problem. But he is right. Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. Meaning that if you have too much power in one place, it can be abused incredibly easily. That is the one thing that he's right about.
Corrupts, absolutely.
But the way that he makes it sound like if we have it in one person's hands, it's bad. But if we have it in many people's hands, it's not bad. I would say it's not as bad, but as we can see with crony capitalism and corruption in our government, it can be bad.
Famous statement by the British Lord Acton. So that alone, it is astonishing how much freedom we made in America. Not we, Americans before me, given the yearning for power. Number two.
It's very weird that he doesn't feel like a historical connection to the forefathers as if they're like not his ideological ancestors. Because when America does something, I feel like if we all feel that, even the Americans who came before us, if we were born in America, we should feel that connection to our ancestry to also shoulder the responsibilities of the actions of our ancestors, so then we too can feel the responsibility not to repeat their actions.
I could just spend time on that. The yearning for fame and recognition. So many people want to be famous and so many people want recognition. That's a reason so many people want to be politicians. Some politicians are in it for idealistic reasons. Most are in it because, you get a lot of fame if you're a senator, just to give an example.
Which means that our own political system has the wrong incentives for people to want to become public servants.
And
I don't think that's a fault of humans. I think that's the fault of having the wrong incentives for people to go after certain positions. Like the same reason why somebody would want to be a CEO is not because that they want to help their employees live better lives, but more because they want to have enough money and choice over their own day and choice over the business itself. I think Joe Biden wanted to be president, not because, simply because he was vice president to Barack Obama and he was jealous, but he even said it himself, is that he wanted to make the decisions. So it's the wrong incentives. We have the wrong incentives, and it doesn't always encourage altruistic people to either come on top of becoming public servants, which we need the type of person who is altruistic, who never really focuses on self to benefit everyone else and be a public servant through that way. Unfortunately, that's not what we have. The incentives do incentivize people who fight for special interests that pay them tons of money. And Lauren Boebert is the kind who shows that she's a lot more in it for the fame, because she goes with culture war issues that don't necessarily do anything to benefit working class individuals or her constituents. So yeah, there is some truth to what he said, but I think he's missing the root cause or even the actual problem of that issue.
Recognition. People ache for recognition. Half the people in Hollywood didn't enter it just because they love acting. If they just loved acting, they'd have joined a Shakespeare group in Boise, Idaho.
That's that we would then have to presuppose that that's how actors feel, but that's not necessarily true either, because a lot of actors don't necessarily like the stage of the play. If you look at movies, they can do a lot more different things than plays can do. I even was watching Joker recently, and I thought, like, if they tried to make a play out of this movie itself, it would have to be structured just a little bit differently because of the way that the movie cuts from scene to scene, because the way that the movie moves from scene to scene is all a part of the pacing and the tension and the feelings that you get from it. So a lot of people who are actors may not want to go into the play setting because of the feelings that are derived from plays over films or films over plays. So we would have to presuppose that play is the best way to do acting, when I can't agree with that. I can't agree with that. And he's also presupposing everybody's choice into going into acting, which I can't agree with that either. I would agree that a lot of people want to be actors because it does lend to fame and recognition. But I think a lot of people are more passionate about the craft in itself. And I think that degrades the craft a bit, which, you know, conservatives aren't afraid of doing. They're anti-intellectual and anti-celebrity unless the celebrity supports their political agenda. And then, oh, we like this one.
But they want to have their name on a movie theater. They want to get an Academy Award. Remember, what do they so often say when they do get an Academy Award? Everything okay, feller? See, when I talk about fame and recognition, he perks up. Okay, you know what? Little humility never hurt a dog. So this is a massive desire. I want to be known. When I talk to...
He didn't even finish his point. He just starts talking to his dog. What was the question that he asked before he talked to his dog? What the fuck was that?
Remember, what do they so often say when they do get an Academy Award?
He couldn't even remember what they say when they get an Academy Award. He just starts petting his dog. Oh, that's the best way to conclude your argument, but is by not including the last sentence of your conclusion. That's amazing.
This is a massive desire. I want to be known. When I talk to kids, and I mean kids, I mean 8th graders. So what do you want to be when you grow up? So many answer famous. That's what you want to be, is famous? That's depressing to me. Because then, by the way, I ask them, what would you like to be famous for?
That's depressing to Prager because in Prager's worldview, in order to be a human being, you have to be productive. Because if you aren't productive, you contribute to nothing in society. And if you contribute nothing to society, you're nothing but a parasite. But that's me presupposing his position, so I could be wrong, but that's where I got that through line from. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with a kid wanting to grow up to be famous. Obviously, as that kid grows up, they might find a way that they would actually rather help human beings, or they may continue want to be famous, but that's also because our society focuses in on bettering your individual self, and if your individual self, your name literally rises above everybody else, is that not peak American pursuit of happiness, where your individuality is so great that it rises above everybody else's? Again, that's an incentive of the society and like everything that we live in these times. It's not a symptom of human nature.
Now, if the kid said a cure for cancer, okay, sounds good to me. They just want to be famous. So they say for anything. So I say, anything? You want to be...
So as long as you want to be famous for something that sounds altruistic or productive, that's okay with Prager. But if you're famous for something that doesn't contribute to society in any meaningful way that Prager considers to be meaningful, then you're a ridiculous person, is what I'm getting out of this.
Famous for most hamburgers.
Which I guess I guess I could agree on that, but like, I don't think that every human being on this planet has to contribute to society, as the society continues to more and more not give a fuck about anybody. I think people should want to pursue whatever makes them happy and live to the fullest extent of their human being life without stomping on other people as well. Or not just other people, but life in general, without having to parasitically live off of Earth in general. As long as your life is your life without the crushing of other life, go for it.
Burgers eaten in a day or in 2 hours? Yeah. And by the way, that's what we do have. The yearning for people.
Are we supposed to shame a kid because he wants to be famous for eating 200 hamburgers faster than anybody else? That shit's fucking entertaining. And if that's what they want to do, good for them, because I might get a good laugh out of it. I also might not, and might not want to enjoy that kind of entertainment. But there are other human beings who do. So as entertainment is another form of productivity, because it at least gives us a feeling in life that regular work really doesn't give us. Entertainment gives us a lot of light in this darkness. So degrading somebody for wanting to entertain others, not here for it. Not here for it. That's not it.
What is Instagram if not a desire for recognition and fame?
I will grant him that point. Yes. Yes. I mean, Instagram is, yes, it's a great brand builder. I'll give you that. Yeah. Yeah. But that also builds on top of the idea that people have to be entrepreneurs in this society, create a business, create a function of earning a living. And guess what? Instagram is an incredibly easy way to do so. And guess who dictated that? You guessed it, motherfucker. The free market. The market dictated that people doing that on Instagram was valuable. Is he blaming human value or natural human intrinsic behavior on that? No, but it's incentivized by our society and our economic system. So how can you blame individuals for exploiting that?
This is a huge thing in the human condition. Another terribly flawed aspect. Now, look, everybody wants recognition for the good and the achievements they've had. That's normal. That's good. I have no issue with that. But
I can already see where this is going. There's no issue with wanting recognition, but what are you getting recognition for? And again, in my own philosophical book, as long as your recognition doesn't come on the death of 6 million Jews, you fucking did it, man. You fucking did it. If it doesn't come off your recognition doesn't come off of separating families and detaining immigrants in overcrowded refugee centers, you fucking did it. You did it. If your recognition comes off of the fact that you acted in front of a camera, embarrassed yourself, and slipped on a banana peel, you fucking did it. You did it. You got your name out there, and congratulations.
But to seek recognition, to seek fame as an end, that's a very big problem, and it leads to corruption in government, because the people are not there to serve you. They are there to serve their fame and recognition. Number 3.
And I generally agree with that point. Having fame and recognition in certain aspects of our society is not healthy, such as politics. To be a public servant in order to be famous or rich is the wrong incentive to have for somebody to want to be a politician. But unfortunately, that is the incentives that our fucking society offers. So why are we going to blame human behavior or natural human behavior as fault for that, when it's obviously just a root coming from the society and contemporary times that we live in? This is all completely ignoring what is driving our human behavior and focusing it in as if it is natural to us, because we live in these times, because we were indoctrinated in our schools to live like this, because our society and our culture dictates the way we operate within the borders of our own country. This is all socially constructed and has nothing to do with natural human behavior. Natural human behavior is incredibly hard to quantify because humans live on a very massive spectrum of how and when and what to do things.
A yearning to be important. That's related to the other one.
Famous?
This is and I'll add to that, a yearning to think you are wonderful. The whole woke thing is that. Oh, look at me. Look at how anti-racist I am. Look at how I am fighting transphobia. Look at how I am fighting homophobia. Look at how I am fighting Islamophobia. Look at how I am fighting, and then you name the evil that you wish to fight. You feel great about yourself. But what if, in fact, there just isn't that much to fight? This country is the least racist, multiracial country in the history of the world. It's one thing.
I don't think that's true either, and you would have to actually back up evidence with that for me to believe you. I think maybe now, we're much closer to that, but we're still dealing with white supremacists and far-right militias that want a white ethno-state to emerge. So, yeah, I'm not sure if there's a more multicultural society that has ever existed. Well, how did he characterize it? I'll Google it just to find out.
To a fort, if in fact There just isn't that much to fight. This country is the least racist, multiracial country in the history of the world. It's one thing to afford.
Okay, let's try least racist, multicultural country in the history of the world. And that is how he framed this exactly. Which, like, again, I don't think that's something that you can quantify without, like, massive studies. Are Canadians less racist than Americans? Multicultural education versus anti-racist education. Dennis Prager tells Bill Maher. So apparently this is something that Dennis Prager has said repeatedly. Australia is a vibrant multicultural country. So yeah, you can't really quantify that. But that isn't to say that we don't still suffer under racism. And if you're a socialist or if you're far left, then you do have a lot of work to do in this country. So it's very interesting that he would say that, what if there's not that many battles to have? Well, if you're a socialist, trust me, there are.
Fought racism and Jim Crow and when slavery. But in the early part of the 21st century, there's just not that much in America. I proved it in an article I wrote, proofs that there was so little racism in America. And I'll give you just one, because I don't want to go through all of that list. And that is microaggressions. Microaggressions proves how little racism there is. They have to invent it. So if you say there's only one race, the human race, the University of California's lists of microaggressions says that's racist. There's only one race is racist.
Okay, I can't even follow him here. There's like no actual sound premise here that I can follow to that conclusion, because like that doesn't make any sense. It literally does not make any sense. Any straw man he created somebody that doesn't exist for him to argue against. So I can't even like pick that apart. I can't even pick it apart. Some of this is so hard to actually follow with a clear thought process. It's amazing that it got this many views.
It's the opposite of racism. So there's another reason that human nature can lead to a disintegration of society, the yearning to think you're terrific and important and famous and so on. Next, sex.
The yearning to feel that you are important is destroying our society. Now get to feeling like you're insignificant. All right. Fine.
Sex. You know, you read about a Jeffrey Epstein and you read about all these people, all these men who have sexually harassed or charged with sexual harassment and all the other aspects of people where sex is a very powerful drive. According to Freud, it's the most powerful drive.
Freud is not always the psychologist that you want to quote, mainly because it seems like Freud had his own kind of biases going on where he was constantly relating literally every human motive to sex. While there probably is that motive in the subconscious a bit, I like Carl Jung more. He did focus in on how we have a lot of allegories and symbolism in our dreams and in our head that is more informative to a person's essence than sex. So I think Freud has a lot more going on there than that we shouldn't lean on everything that Freud says. But here's something interesting that Rudy Giuliani just said on Steve Bannon's show.
Do you have time for a funny story?
Yeah, we got about a minute.
I get this one done in a minute. So every once in a while, I was always his partner. So we'd always ride together. He always wanted me to drive because he wanted to be smoking cigars. So one day we're driving, and these paparazzi are driving us crazy. They're taking pictures and taking pictures and taking pictures. And he said, Giuliani, what did you do now? They're all following you around. You know how I hate pictures taken? I know you're famous, but damn, can't you tell them to stay away? And he's like growling. And I say, you just come up to the green with me. Come on. So on the green is Michelle Wie, and she's getting ready to putt. Now, Michelle Wie is gorgeous. She's 6 feet, and she has a strange putting stance. She bends all the way over, and her panties show. And the press was going crazy. It was.
And at that moment right there, too, you can see the disappointment hit Steve Bannon's co-host. I'm not familiar with his name, but also Steve Bannon, as Rudy Giuliani gets further into the story about a woman accidentally revealing her panties. This is amazing. And this is somebody that Dennis Prager and his ilk have spent their time defending. Fucking hilarious, man. Like, the fact that Steve Bannon shows on his face that he is really embarrassed to have Rudy Giuliani as a person that he's worked with is just fucking amazing. I love it.
Following her all around because they were trying to take pictures of her panties. I said, Roger, it's not me, it's not you, it's her panties. Right? Is that okay to tell that joke? I'm not sure.
We already told it, so I don't know.
And then Rudy Giuliani just laughs it off with his slimy laugh that he has. And Bannon and his co-host obviously show that they're embarrassed to even put a platform for this guy who completely embarrasses himself every time he gets a chance at this point. So when we're speaking of Jeffrey Epstein, let's remember Rudy Giuliani.
And that could lead, and it does, it leads to a lot of terrible stuff. It has to be kept in check. But who teaches kids that you have to keep yourself in check? For all of my adult life, I have explained the difference between a religious education and a secular education. When I had my religious Jewish education through 12th grade, half day in Hebrew, half day in English, very rigorous education in Judaism, and kids with Christianity, the same thing. You learn the biggest battle in your life is with you. Or as I always put it, I was taught that the biggest problem in Dennis Prager's life is Dennis Prager.
Yeah. I went through regular public school and I came to that same conclusion as well. I think a lot of it actually ended up coming from when I started understanding Buddhism and Taoism a bit better. So you could actually say that any religion can teach you that. Even a lot of self-help goes in that direction. But it wasn't religion that taught me that sexual harassment and non-consensual sex wasn't okay. My own experience and morals did. I wasn't raised in a very religious household. So thinking that those are necessary to stop Jeffrey Epstein's or Rudy Giuliani's is, no. Can't agree with that conclusion. No, just out of personal experience, because I didn't need a religious upbringing to understand how to treat human beings, which I'm still trying to learn better how to do. Yeah, that's not a solely Judeo-Christian value or benefit. You can get that out of a lot of things. And one mentor that it has existed through time and space that has helped me in doing so is Alan Watts, who brought a lot of Eastern philosophy into America in the 60s and 70s and the 50s. Dive into that if you want to. But his answer to the last one, because he went through power, fame, and sex, his answer to controlling your sexual urges is through religion, I guess, even though somewhere in Deuteronomy, if you rape a woman, that you have to pay her father and then marry her, which I don't think is a great lesson to teach your kids.
But not in secular schools. You learn that the biggest problem in your life is something outside of you, like America.
And that's the fascinating thing that Buddhism and Taoism has told me, is that the things that happen within my life are not are not exclusive from the things that happen outside of my life. There's actually a bit of receiving and giving in this relationship. I receive from the external world, and I also give to the external world from my internal world. So again, I don't think that public school failed me on that. I think that just really does overall have to deal with mentors in general. You don't have to have a preacher to understand that, nor do you have to have a monk. You just need at least a wise enough mentor through your upbringings to help you kind of pick apart life and figure out what you perceive through it.
So while the religious are battling themselves, the secular, not all, this is a generalization, are, especially on the left, they're battling America. Not
Which there's nothing wrong with battling external things. David did not battle the Goliath within. He battled the Goliath that was killing people. So, of course, at times you have to rise up and fight external powers, especially if they've become corrupt and harmful.
themselves.
And the thing about the left is that they've come to understand how certain powers and institutions within America have become corrupt and harmful.
Next.
But also, if you can overcome your own internal flaws and understand your being better, then you might be able to help others in a more sufficient way. And I'm not necessarily proof of that. I'm still working on it myself. I'm a continually evolving, unfinished project. But I let that contribute to the fact that I have a lot of work to do. And that actually feeds a little bit more purpose into myself and doesn't give me a hopelessness. So, religion, it's good for you. Is it necessary? No.
Lack of wisdom. We're not born wise. And without wisdom, all the good intentions in the world are useless. In fact, good intentions without wisdom usually leads to evil. What is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions? That's it. Why is that? Because those people don't have wisdom. They just have good intentions. Good intentions without wisdom leads to hell.
I mean, he answered that question. That's a rhetorical sentence. It's an aphorism. But, I don't know, man. Hell's full of good meanings, but heaven is full of good works. The Road to Hell it was first published in a book in 1855. It's a biblical resemblance. A common meaning of the phrase is that individuals may have the intention to undertake good actions, but nevertheless fail to take action. This inaction may be due to procrastination, laziness, or other subversive vice. So what I'm getting from this interpretation is that wisdom doesn't necessarily have to do with it, but action does. As such, the saying is an admonishment that a good intention is meaningless unless followed through. Yeah, so he came up with his own answer to an aphorism that didn't ask for an answer. A different interpretation of the saying is that wrongdoings or evil actions are often undertaken with good intentions, or that good intentions, when acted upon, may have unintended consequences. Which I guess that can feed into the wisdom, because if you don't have wisdom in committing good intentions, then you may not be aware of the unintended consequences. But he didn't make that through line. He just said it.
And we're leading America to hell today. All these good intentions. Oh, I'm here to fight racism. I'm here to fight all these phobias. I'm here to fight capitalism. That's not wise.
Why is it not wise to fight oppressive powers? That's something that you would have to support evidence with, which he's not going to.
Lack of courage is a very, very normative part of the human condition. Very few humans are born courageous.
Is he saying that humans are inherently born cowardice? Because I don't think that's true either.
You have to want to be courageous to be courageous. It doesn't come naturally to almost anybody. Some people have it naturally, very few do. So therefore you have this herd mentality. And I will admit, I wrote about this in a recent column, The Good American, that's what it's called, and how few Americans are exhibiting courage today. Oh, you want to close down my business with a lockdown, Governor Newsom? Go right ahead. We won't protest. Yes, I can no longer feed my family properly, but I'm going to let my restaurant die. I won't even open it up.
All right, he's creating another straw man, but somebody who complies with the lockdowns, saying that they lack courage because they're not going to protest it, just means that also like that person then doesn't also agree with why it's being locked down. So it comes with another presupposition that I can't even agree with, because people who did shut down their business probably did understand the action necessary. So yeah, I would have to believe that there's no science to back down the idea of social distancing and being alone together, which when we were trying to flatten the curve, a lot of people agreed that that was the right thing to do, even the president of the United States at the time. So I don't think that's a lack of courage, and it seems like he's lacking a bit of knowledge here on that subject.
Or people wearing masks outdoors when they're walking their dog. This is a herd mentality.
But again, that presupposes that that person doesn't understand the science behind wearing a mask and why you would wear a mask. And I'm not going to explain it here, because if you know why you're wearing a mask, then you know why. So I'm not going to fight that argument right now.
I'm not telling you not to wear a mask indoors when you go to a restaurant or when you go to a store. No. But it's a little scary to watch people walking pretty much alone outdoors. And
there is no problem whatsoever in asking the government to justify itself when it's telling you to do something. There's never anything wrong with that. But to deny evidence that supports why they are justified in asking you to do this or ordering you to do this, that doesn't allow for like an actual good faith discussion to happen between you and your government, because you simply want to be left alone to do what you have to do regardless of whatever anybody else says, which means that you cannot be persuaded whatsoever to an actual justified government.
Wearing a mask. That's a herd mentality. That's not science. Oh, how's this one? People don't yearn to be free. People yearn to be taken care of.
But if you're taking care of like your bare necessities, that sounds like your day is free, like opened up to do other things other than earn the surplus value for an employer.
I've talked about that on occasion. Liberty is a value, not an instinct. I'm talking to you about all these built-in flaws in human nature, and we still built America the way it is.
That's the unfortunate thing that he's not seeing here, though, that it's more natural for human beings to be free of society than it is for humans to be in society. We've constructed society over hundreds of years, so it seems more natural to us at this point. But the society that we've constructed is exactly that. It's a social construct that we made up with our minds and that we all continue to agree with to continue doing. But our natural state is to actually just exist.
The yearning for utopia. People really believe that you could make a place where there's no more inequality and there's no more hatred and there's no such thing as no more.
You can blame Star Trek for that. Star Trek fed that into the dream of a full luxury space communism where we ascended most of these things that tie us down to this mortal material realm. But I do think that there is like a form of utopia that we can reach on America, but that means we would have to strip away most of our prejudices that we are still very much tied to today. And it would also constitute a lot of ego death to go down, a lot of ego death, a lot of dissolvement of the importance of self. So while I did make fun of him saying that we need to feel more insignificant, there is a level of that you should feel insignificant to the point that you're not necessarily more important than any other life form on this planet.
It doesn't exist. We can lessen, we can improve, and we have. But you can't have a place with none of these things. It doesn't exist except in the imagination of PhDs.
And that's because we live in a place that is not a utopia. So yes, yeah, duh.
Ingratitude. Oh God, that alone explains what's going on in America. Human beings are not grateful by nature. I have a simple proof. How many times have you been told when you were a kid, or did you tell your kids, say thank you? If we were naturally grateful, why would we have to be told 10,000 times, say thank you?
But of course, and he might even mention there are kids that don't have to be told to say thank you, that they have learned that through social norms in general, that gratitude is something that you should just show on a basic level.
Because it doesn't come naturally. Gratitude is a value, not an instinct. Ingratitude is normal. And that
You can't say that gratitude isn't normal and that the opposite is more normal, because you can't have one without the other. They're equivalent in their naturalism. Is that ingratitude and gratitude are as inherent as anything else. Human beings come out natural, and they learn to be grateful or ingrateful as they grow in experience.
that's what the left has for America. They are not only ungrateful, they teach others to be ungrateful.
I don't agree with that either, especially when you come from like a Black Lives Matter perspective. If you call them ungrateful for what they have today, then that kind of makes it sound like you're saying that the people who fought for civil rights in the past were also ungrateful for the situation that they were living in at the time. So that's not a great position to take either.
Say that if I had to define the average BA, master's, or PhD, it's a degree in ingratitude.
More anti-intellectualism. Just because you're critical of the system, you're ingrateful.
That's what you get
Ungrateful.
at our schools today.
Yeah,
How can we produce ungrateful people?
You well-educated,
And ungrateful people are miserable human beings, both in both senses of miserable. Unhappy.
I could agree with that point, is that someone who practices gratitude more often is probably a much happier person. But he's really just conflating the idea of intellectuals and the left, who the right is completely opposed to no matter what they do, are ungrateful people.
And the way they treat other people. Ungrateful people are awful people. And
I wouldn't go that far. Their actions still have to constitute whether or not they're awful people, but simply being ungrateful, I don't think that's enough to make somebody an awful person. I would have to wonder what they're actually supposed to be grateful for.
schools produce them in the millions.
Anti-intellectualism.
Oh, finally, the psychological impediments to being a decent person. Even all the built-in, then there's other stuff. The person who just has physiological issues, psychological, physiological issues, which prevents them from appreciating what they have.
What?
So it's incredibly hard to make a decent society with this raw material. So America's divided between left and...
But it's also really hard when you misrepresent the positions of others who don't necessarily agree with you.
Right. The right knows how flawed human nature is and says, wow, what an achievement America is. The left doesn't acknowledge how flawed human nature is and look.
They're the only ones pointing out the flaws in the current system. They're the only ones who pointed out the flaws in past systems. Come on, man.
Looks at it and goes, what a miserable society.
Conservative Party, the word conservative literally means conserve, as in like keep things the way that they are.
Okay,
that's all I got.
That's important stuff,
sound
if I'm allowed to say that myself. We begin with your questions. Take it away.
Hi, my name's Sophia Dugal. I'm 17 years old and I'm from Newport Beach, California. So at least half of Americans, some 74 plus million people, feel they were robbed of their
That's not even close to half of America. That's half of the people that voted. It's almost half of the people that voted. It's not half of America. It's a less fraction of that. 74 million out of 350 million is not half. You're missing about 100 million in that.
Constitutionally granted voice in this past election. How do you suggest, or what do you suggest these Americans do to cope with the fact that there appears to be somewhat of a double standard and one party seems to be above the law?
Okay, well, look, It's true, tens of millions of Americans are very suspicious with regard to the last election. But the question, if I may, Sophia, is even larger than that, because people can dismiss it. Oh, you're crazy. You're paranoid. You're hallucinating. You're making up stuff. So,
or you're perpetuating a narrative that has no actual evidence to base it upon.
Let's talk about stuff, the division in America that can't be denied. The suppression of free speech. Half of America thinks it's okay, and half of America thinks it's evil to suppress free speech.
I feel like almost all Americans would agree that it's wrong to suppress free speech. The argument that came out of big tech censoring people is that the left wanted to dunk on the right because it's part of company policy to do whatever they want, especially when you agree to the terms and service. So the left fucked up by giving them that point. But the thing is all of it was to dunk on Republicans who constantly say that it's the right of companies to have their own policies that can dictate how they operate. That's what you allow with corporations and the structures that they have that allow authoritarian hierarchy within them. But they're not saying that it's a good idea to censor free speech by the government. By doing that is straight up breaking the First Amendment if the government was to shut down your freedom of speech.
That's one we could all acknowledge that we have this massive division on. When I fight using clarity. Clarity is my best way.
My favorite thing is that he told her to let go of that voting thing because it's something that they can deny, which I said is a narrative that has no evidence to base itself off of, and that's why it is easy to deny. Jesus fucking to deny. That's easy because it has no evidence to actually base its validity on. The freedom, the suppression of free speech is also a misrepresentation of the position of the left and can be disagreed with because of the situation and circumstance that he's basing it off of.
Weapon. Where I can have, it happens on my radio show. Look, I have 35 years of practice of dialoguing and debating with people who don't agree with me. And I've learned a lot, obviously. And one of the things is, and it happens a lot, and it's very touching, where someone will call up and disagree with me, and then I'll give an answer very calmly, and then there's a little silence, and they go, oh. And I always commend them because they actually listened to my answer and then took it in. So 40 to 50% of America's young people think it's okay to suppress hate speech. They say, oh, we believe in free speech, but not for hate speech. But of course, they don't realize then they're not for free speech. Free speech.
Because absolute free speech is, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So having absolute free speech by saying that hate speech is protected ignores the civil rights anti-discrimination law. And so what Dennis Prager is arguing here is actually what benefited many fascists and other like Ku Klux Klan type groups to thrive is because their hate speech was protected under the First Amendment. Now, the thing that also he's ignoring is that there are consequences to your free speech. If there is a movement of people that get you denied from having a public speech in a public forum, that's not the government overreaching and shutting down your speech. It's not a breach of the First Amendment. It's the consequence of you having your free speech by a popular movement. It's not the same thing. It is not the same thing. And I hate that they degrade the power of the people by saying that they're acting like a mob that is 1984 Orwellian. It really degrades the power of people when they collectively come together and say that this person is not accepted because of their views that harm other people within our community.
Which includes hate speech, or what you define as hate speech.
See, and he's a free speech absolutist, and unfortunately I am not. I don't think that it is a good idea for certain forms of speech to continue on. Should the government be the one to shut it down? I don't agree with that either. But should there be proper protections for people who are usually the ones at the harmful end of this speech? Yes. People should be protected from hate speech, from receiving hate speech, and from being the victims of hate speech.
Otherwise, what is the point of free speech? Otherwise, free speech means there's only free speech for love speech. then there isn't free speech.
But why would you want to perpetuate hate speech? Why would you want it to be allowed? Other than being a hateful person. What is the actual benefit of having hate speech allowed?
Who's against free speech for love speech? Nobody's suppressing I love you.
Because it causes no harm. What are we talking about? What?
It's where people differ. And you then have been taught to label what you differ with hate speech. If somebody actually says, I don't think it's fair for biological men to compete against biological women in sports, why is that hatred? You may differ with them.
It's discrimination. You're discriminating against somebody for their identity, their existence. Discrimination is a form of hate speech.
You may think it's fair. I think it's cheap.
That isn't to say that there isn't quantifiable, non-social constructed difference between biological men and women. The thing is, though, is that there are certain requirements to bring trans women into the athletic competitiveness for to compete in women's sports. They have to meet a certain criteria in order to do so. But this conversation is always brought up to merely exclude trans people from participating, which is a form of discrimination, which is a form of hate speech. That's why, Dennis.
Cheating. Because if biological men can in fact compete against biological women in sports, then there's no reason for women's teams to begin with. If men don't have biological men, I'm not denying that there are men who believe that they are women, and I honor that, that's fine. And if your name is Cynthia now, I will call you Cynthia, and I'm not being cute. That's a separate issue. But allowing you with your male body that you can't get rid of, allowing you with your male muscles, your male bone structure, your greater height in most instances.
The thing is that some things in the biological structure of trans people can be changed through hormonal therapy. Not everything. They're not going to grow ovaries. They're not going to grow. Women aren't going to grow. Regular testicles and start producing sperm. But there is, through taking testosterone, it does increase your bone density, it does increase your muscle capacity, and it does change your body physiologically in a lot of ways. So again, by just merely fitting everybody into these biological boxes, you do ignore some of the biology that does change after hormonal therapy, which most athletes have to go through for years before they can participate in the gender category that they identify with.
This is to race against females. That's called cheating. I'm anti-cheating. Okay? But what I just said would be labeled by Facebook as hate speech.
Because it's discrimination. Merely judging someone based off of their existence and identity is, and I'll say it again, discrimination. A form of, you guessed it, hate speech. You're not judging somebody by their actual character. You didn't get to know that person and whether or not they actually went through years of hormonal therapy to reduce their bone density and muscle mass. You didn't do that. You just said they're a biological male and I do not like it. Them competing in women's sports. That's discrimination.
Or the new term, misinformation. It's misinformation that there's a need for women's teams and men's teams. If biological men can compete against biological women, then let us end men's teams and women's teams, because you're denying that men have an advantage in sports. Okay?
You're also denying the fact that women can't increase the possibility of their athletic ability to compete with men, which is a little derogatory towards women. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have a massive hill to climb in actually being competitive with men, but women can become incredibly athletic beyond the levels of other men. So they may not be above every man, but there's probably some men that women can outcompete. That's a little derogatory on women as well, which derogatory, a little bit of hate speech.
What I just said is so obvious that you have to have been brainwashed.
That also feeds into like the patriarchy too, to think that like all men are always going to be better than women. That's like saying that why get a woman to do a man's job? That's another level of misogyny I don't even think he intended.
From early grades to believe otherwise. What I just said is not debatable. Now, I won't suppress your...
I just refuted it. It is debatable. It is. And he's participating in a certain fallacy here. I can't remember the name of. I think it has to do with Hume's law, is that this is the way it is, and that's why this is why it ought to be. Or it ought to be like this because this is the way it is. It doesn't necessarily build a whole entire argument. That's it's said to finish an argument as an absolute win when those things are debatable, when you don't necessarily agree with what ought, because ought is subjective in a lot of ways. So you can disagree with Prager. You can.
Right to say something foolish. But I will acknowledge it is not debatable. Men, the biology of males is advantageous, which is the only reason we have female teams and female track, right? That's the reason. Otherwise, men and women would compete in every sport. But we know men have a physical advantage. They don't lose that advantage just because they say they're women. So Sophia, it goes well beyond this election. The differences are so profound. So what did you want to know?
Culture war issues. Those are culture war issues and don't really have anything to do with policy that affects the material conditions of working class individuals or middle class.
How do you suggest what these Americans do? We have to articulate our position. There are tens of millions of us. We have to articulate our position constantly and eloquently. Will they shut you down? Yes, they will.
That's consequence
but
of free
it's harder
speech.
To shut down 70 million people who keep talking than 2 million people who keep talking and 68 million who are afraid to speak up. What's our timing?
25.
Good. Chris, Raleigh, North Carolina, Prager Force member. Hi, Chris. Hi, Dennis, Otto, Snoopy, and Megan's arm. Wow.
Got another one.
That is nice. I hope when I am your age, Dennis, I have experienced a full enough life to have an ounce of the wisdom you possess. The issue is not that I've had a full life. I've had a full life. The reason that I have wisdom is because I was steeped in religion from a very early age. And it's because...
But then, like, that wisdom is questionable because the Bible is a mystical book filled with miracles. Miracles are unexplainable happenings and events, phenomena that can't be explained without the existence of God. So having that wisdom steeped and based and rooted on religion might make that wisdom not quite strong enough to deal with the whole of reality. Because if every excuse is because God, you don't actually have a very strong reasoning or argument.
And this I don't even take credit for. I wanted wisdom from a very early age. You have to, whatever goal you want, you have to want it. You don't become a decent person, a good person even, just by being one. You have to want to become one. You have to want to be wise, and you can become wise. That's the reason I have read wiser thinkers than me. But you don't learn wiser thinkers than you any longer in American schools. They dropped Shakespeare.
Did they? I learned Shakespeare in public school. I didn't get a college degree, but I ended up still having a curiosity for knowledge, and so I've accumulated a bunch of books from a lot of people who are smarter than me.
Because he's a white male. But who cares if he's a white male? I only care if he has wisdom to impart.
Oh my God. Okay, so that was obviously fake. Everybody still knows who Shakespeare is, I'm pretty sure. That is hilarious that he just said that we don't learn Shakespeare anymore because he's white. That is hilarious. But that's okay. We don't need Shakespeare. We've got Tupac and Lil Wayne. That's fine.
But the unwise are now teaching our kids how to be unwise.
All right, so we're going to have to take a quick pause so I can upload this properly onto the podcast platform. Oh my God. I can't believe he said we took out Shakespeare because he's white. Oh, we don't even like really know the true identity of William Shakespeare. There's actually a theory that he is somebody else who was banished from his homeland and created William Shakespeare as a just kind of like a name to release plays and writings under. So we can't even really follow historically whether he has like I don't know, social justice issues or stuff like that to like cancel him in the left in the left's way. But that is fucking hilarious because that's not happening. That is not happening. But we'll be right back after this short break because I just realized that this is one of those longer podcasts and my conversion software does not let me do a certain amount of gigs. So pardon my low budgetry, and we shall be right back with more of this nonsense in just a little bit. If you're watching YouTube, I'm sorry, you'll have to go to the next video.